everybody. My name is Pete Berube. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the 29th of September meeting of the Finance Committee. Before I have the members introduce themselves, I'll just start by stating that this is a split session meeting with some members in attendance, as well as members joining us via Zoom. And then also tonight we have several members, all three members actually, of the Select Board. So briefly, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Peter Germain and ask him to call the Select Board meeting to order, as they have quorum as well.
Thank you, Mr. Berube, for inviting us to your Finance Committee meeting this evening. At this point, I will call the Select Board meeting to order. All three members, Aaron Underhill, Craig Schultz, and Peter Germain, are present. We look forward to working with you this evening.
Okay, and Sarah, if you could just introduce yourself, we'll go down the line real quick, just so people have faces and names, and then I'll switch it over to the Zoom attendees for them to introduce themselves.
I'm Sarah Reyes, Himmelfarb Street. I've lived in Mills for about 19 years.
Joyce Boyardi, Orchard Street, resident for 39 years.
Kathy McInnes, 78 Island Road.
John Stedman, 26 Glen Ellen Boulevard, 2-year resident.
And then just to keep it simple, also joining us from the Finance Committee via Zoom is Mr. Peter Underhill, Mr. Jim Borgman, I believe Miss Jody Garzon is on, and I think that is it. Did I miss anybody?
No.
Okay. With that said, we've called to order. We've introduced ourselves. I'm going to turn the floor over to Select Board member Mr. Craig Schultz, and if he's going to speak to us a little bit about the town charter changes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back at the Finance Committee. Many fun years there. And I also served on the Charter Review Committee along with several other people in the town, and thank you for inviting me to bring this in to present our recommendations that the Select Board is putting forward in Article 9 of the warrant. The town charter is the governing document of the town. If you think about the charter as kind of the Constitution and the bylaws as just a set of laws that are on the books, it's a big deal to change the charter. It's a multi-step process. It has to be voted at town meeting. It has to be voted by the state legislature, I believe. And then it also has to be voted Mike Gazinski, does it have to be voted on the polls also?
It does. It has to be approved on the local ballot.
Yeah. So this is a multi-year process. We worked on this for about 2 years to get to this point. Then it's going to take us it could be another year before it's finalized, maybe a year and a half even, depending on how it falls on the ballots and stuff. But the first step is to approve the changes in Article 9 or modify them so that we can approve them. So I'll just go briefly through the recommendations that came out of the committee and that the Select Board chose to recommend for the warrant for the town meeting, unless anybody has any questions on the process. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move through. The first section, first off, our town charter was the smallest that we looked at of all the surrounding towns. It was very, very, very thin. It had, it said we're going to have a moderator. It said we're going to have a finance committee. It barely spelled out their duties. They're spelled out in more detail in the bylaws, which is appropriate, but we thought we needed to put a little bit more meat behind a few of these items. The first recommendation for a change was Section 2, Item 7 of the bylaw, which talked about the presiding officer at town meeting. And really, this is a procedural thing. It's going to eliminate confusion was the reason we put it in. It's going to allow the moderator to appoint a deputy moderator at their discretion if they're not able to attend town meeting. Now, Aaron, a former moderator, knows this, and every moderator we talk to knows that this is a power that exists within the moderator's toolbox already. The moderator is allowed to appoint a deputy moderator. But by putting it in our charter, it eliminates all the discussion and confusion about whether it is legal, whether it isn't legal. It's right out there in black and white. We can move on. And the reason we put that in there was because if there's an illness, an accident, or a reason that the moderator can't make it to the meeting, this gives them the ability to appoint somebody so the meeting can continue. The intent is always for the moderator to be there. The intent would be for the moderator to show up, but if there's a horrible scenario where they can't, this gives them the ability in black and white to appoint somebody to conduct the meeting. Any questions on that article, that portion of the article? Okay, hearing none, I'll move to the next one. This one came up with at the committee also. It was just a change to amend the name of the Finance Committee to the Warrant Committee. And I mentioned this last year when I was on the Finance Committee. And the reason we put this one in we put this in was to try to really explain what this committee does a little bit better. For 22 years, I tried to recruit people to the Finance Committee, and I kept hearing that I'm not good with numbers. And that's only a small portion of what this committee does. Their biggest role is, as you all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, is to report and recommend on the warrant. Finance is a major piece of that, but there's zoning articles, there's other things that relate to this as well. So this would be just a nomenclature change. It would change it from Finance Committee to Warrant Committee. And many of our surrounding towns made this change years ago. It's more the norm than not, because the financial management of the town really resides with the select board and the town manager and the town administrator and the finance director of the town. The Finance Committee, their role is to recommend on the warrant for town meeting. So that's why this was recommended. Doug Riley from the Finance Committee, I don't know if he's still on or not, it's not on the call, unless he's on the stage, I can't see him.
Not on.
He was on the committee with me, and we both thought this was a reasonable suggestion. And I want to be clear, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. If you guys decide that you hate that name change and recommend against it, no hard feelings. But we thought that it explained it in a way that made a little more sense to the layperson who you may be recruiting to fill a seat on the Warrant Committee as opposed to the Finance Committee. Any questions on that item?
Craig, could you
Yes.
kindly synopsize some of the discussion that the Warrant Committee had, or the Charter Committee had for and against this? And if you can't synopsize it, trust us, we can find it. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I would like to hear.
Yeah, there was, I'll admit, I proposed it. Doug agreed with it. The idea was to try to make it describe what the committee actually does. We thought that it needed to mention the warrant in the Finance Committee because in years past, we've had people who thought they were the financial managers of the town. And that's not the role of that committee. The Finance Committee's role is to recommend on the warrant for town meeting. That is their most important duty, and that's what they should be focusing on to make those recommendations based on the warrant. And so we thought that it wasn't a long discussion. It was pretty much that was the gist of it. We felt that the Warrant Committee described what what the Finance Committee does better than the term Finance Committee.
I'd like to, if I could, make a comment.
Certainly, go ahead.
I kind of like the idea, but I prefer something like Warrant Recommendations Committee. I realize it adds another word, but I think it's important that we understand, as Craig has noted several times, that the Finance Committee, or as it exists, doesn't per se create the warrants. What they do is review the warrants and make recommendations on the warrants. Having been on the Finance Committee for a few years myself, I tend to think that it makes some sense to be a little more descriptive, and I don't think adding the one word hurts. In fact, I think it helps to further define what the committee really is doing. That's my,
And again, we came up with the Warrant Committee name because that's what many of our surrounding towns call it. As we were reading charters, and we read a lot of charters, this was a pretty common descriptor, but I don't disagree with Peter's comment that adding one word here or there isn't going to change the intent at all, and it might clarify.
I'm sorry, Peter. Oh, I'm sorry, may I?
Yes, you may.
Peter, what did you recommend it be? What were your
the warrant recommendations committee.
warrant recommendations? Okay, I remember when this discussion came about last year at our meeting, and I didn't have a problem when I was asked to be on the finance committee to understand what I wasn't fearful to go on it because I didn't know finance. When it was explained to me what the job was, I was fine with it. We do deal with finances. We may not be the ones to do all the number crunching, but we do have a lot of say about what we believe is a good decision on a warrant or not. So eliminating finance, I've already spoken that I'm not a fan of it. I don't know if there's some way of incorporating the finance warrant committee, because then you're covering the two things that they actually do. We do. We deal with the warrants and we deal with finance recommendations.
I think you deal, my take on, Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that the finance work you do relates to the finance on the warrant, though, and that's the important part. That's why we tried to differentiate it, because the day-to-day management of the finance, and I've had people on the committee, and I think that, Peter's dealt with them too when we were chairs, that really believed our job was to work with the town accountant, and that's not the finance committee's role. That's not, and I'm just trying for clarification, but again, like I said, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. It's a suggestion to try to modernize it, standardize it, go with what other towns are doing, but again, no hard feelings if the finance committee recommends another way.
Craig, I'm just going to give you my personal take, and my first reaction to this was, I don't really like it, but like most things, when you explain them, I'm trying to keep an open mind, and I understand your viewpoint. My opinion is we spend most of our time, even though the most important thing we're doing is Springtown meeting, prep for the Springtown meetings, prep for the Fall Town meeting, and fulfill our roles and responsibilities. We spend most of our time talking about finance. There are some warrant, some non-budgetary, and that's a word I want to come back to. There are some other articles that we spend time on, but for the most part, most of our time is going over departmental budgets, forecasts, and different things, as you know. One of my concerns with a name change is, will we confuse the public? Will we further cause, my perception, again, just my perception is that, haven't done any scientific studies, but my perception is that the general public and residents of the town don't necessarily know what this committee does regardless of the name of it. And so if the finance committee disappears and it becomes something else, we'll have people saying, well, what, I thought there was a finance committee, now there's a warrant committee. And, there's some public messaging that has to happen regardless. And obviously it will happen because it will be on a ballot, and we'll explain it at, multiple town meetings as well as a town election if it gets that far. And then the other thing I would toss out is that perhaps, maybe you've considered it, and we're going to debate or discuss this more within this committee. We really would just want to hear what the charter committee is recommending for this article. We're going to continue to discuss this, but perhaps the name could be Warrant and Finance Committee, or I just wrote this down because I liked it even better, is Warrant and Budget Committee, because that's really what we're talking about is budgets. It's bigger than just the finance piece of it, which implies one thing to me. Budget kind of incorporates both the day-to-day operations and the operating budget, as well as the finance piece of it, or the lending and the borrowing and the payback piece of it that we spend a lot of time talking. So I will close at that again, because we will discuss it further in the FinCom, but I do want to give my colleagues the opportunity to ask or comment as they would like.
And my comment on that is, if this becomes a sticking point for this article, we're focusing on the trees, not the forest, because there are a lot of critical things in here, and I don't want this to be the item that hangs up the critical work that's in the charter review piece, because this is, as I said, minutia. It's not going to change how the town runs one way or the other.
Right.
If it changes or doesn't change. The attempt was there, but if this becomes a sticking point, recommend remove section 2-8 if you guys feel that way, and I won't object. You know, it's something I thought made sense, but I don't want this to be the focus of the warrant or the charter review discussion.
Understand. So
Because there's so many other important pieces.
any more comments on, from the Finance Committee on this particular topic?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. McGinnis, thank you.
could I please ask through the chair, has the select board voted on this?
I'm sorry,
Has the select board voted on this issue?
yeah, we did vote on the issue. We allowed the warrant committee, we did have discussion, but we felt it was important to hear what the finance committee had to say, because it's their committee. And before we make a final prognostication on this, I think it was important for us to hear what you discuss and what you come up with. And I agree with Mr. Schultz. This is not something that is worth, as they say, dying on this hill for.
Yeah, so, I mean, this really impacts 9 people in the town quite heavily, and it might confuse a few others, you know, but very inside baseball. If I can move on to the other section, because you can continue your discussion on that at your convenience, Mr. Chairman, if I can continue.
My tongue-in-cheek comment is maybe you'd feel differently if we were up here talking about changing the select board or changing your name. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah.
All right.
We already did change the select board from select
You did.
select persons to I wasn't there, but from select men to select persons. But
All right.
we endorsed that as a finance committee as well when it came before us.
Okay, any more comments? I want to keep us moving and on track. Any more comments from the Finance Committee? Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, and bringing up, piggybacking on your comment, Article 3, Section 1, the first item is to change the Board of Selectmen to Select Board in the charter. So it's right there on our list as the first item that we want to change in the executive branch section. We've already changed it in the bylaw, but we haven't changed it in the charter, so we have to make the two read the same. Bylaw is just a simple town meeting vote. Charter takes the process I described. The second part of that is moving the select board from 3 members to 5 members. And then it goes further detail of how to move us from the current 3 to the future 5. So that's the second part of that article, of that section rather, Article 3-1. So rename the selectmen in the charter to select board in the charter and move the board from 3 members to 5 members. And the reason is because running the town is getting more and more complicated, more and more expertise is needed. I was quite active on many committees when I was on the finance committee. I thought I was going to be prepared to move to the select board, but the number of meetings increased significantly. And they're not just town meetings, they're Norfolk County meetings, there's affordable housing, there's a lot more committee work and volunteer work than it's easy for 3 people to do, especially as Aaron and I and Peter are all working. If you're not retired, it's very hard to find time to do all of these meetings that are required with this job. So we thought spreading the load, and this is what the charter committee thought also, spreading the load over 5 people would be an easier move.
If I could also make a comment.
Go ahead.
At 3 people, none of us can meet with each other without declaring an open meeting, which is very problematic when there are issues, particularly if you want to have the chair and the vice chair discuss an upcoming agenda or something like that. We are not able to do that without violating open meeting law. So by going to 5 members, it gives us that ability. It gives us the ability to have a quorum if one person is absent. Not that we can't with 2 people, but with 2 people as the select board operating, it's pretty minimal at that point. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of work that goes into every meeting, as Mr. Schultz just pointed out. I can tell you that I spent a few years on the finance committee and a few years of that as chair. And yes, there's a fair amount of work. I was not prepared for the amount of work that I've encountered here on the select board. It is quite significant, as anyone who's been on the select board will be able to tell you. So.
And Mr. Chairman, Finance Committee Chair, not you, Pete. One other item, just for an example, Aaron and I both found ourselves at the same meeting. It was not posted as a select board meeting, so we couldn't talk. We could listen. It was a growth, new growth in town meeting, but we both attended and we didn't coordinate. We didn't post the meeting, so it limited our ability to participate. If it had been a 5-member board, we both could have contributed to the meeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yep, go ahead.
Personally, I think it's been long overdue, having a 5-member. I think it opens for more discussion and gives a better opportunity for disagreement or agreement, and not feel that there's 2 against 1, or, I think it's and it's again, for your own sakes too, for the amount of work you have to do. But I think 5 members is it's long overdue.
Okay, any more comments or questions?
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, please.
I'm not questioning the content of the article. I'm questioning how it's being presented. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but as you said before, Mr. Schultz, a lot of these items are housekeeping. They're common sense, just logical continuations of things that need to be taken care of, temporary moderator and such. This article is a major change to an elected position of the executive branch. And I'm jumping ahead, but section 4-2 about the town clerk being appointed, I feel these need more consideration and shouldn't be lumped in with the housekeeping items. Did the select board consider separating these into their own standalone articles?
Mr. Chairman, we did discuss that. We also discussed procedurally whether you can vote on the first one, lock it, finish it, vote on the second one, lock it, finish it, move to the third one, and vote that way. And we did not reach a consensus on that or a conclusion on that. But I think you do take a point that some of these, the 2 in particular that you cited, are probably going to be a little more discussion. I really honestly think Article 3 -3 won't be as contentious as the town clerk issue. But I think that we will find out if we can separate these into multiple articles and still have it do what the state legislature needs. Changing your charter is like changing the Constitution. It's not an easy process, and I don't know what the votes are that are required, but we can ask the town legal counsel if it can be separated. We can talk to the moderator about voting one portion and moving on to the next portion, so that we can vote it in chunks, in bites, if it still has to be one article.
If I may make a comment, I think it's important that we ask Mr. Grzinski. I have talked with him regarding just this issue. He's saying that he has told me that on the whole, most communities present it in this fashion and take each one individually, and that is acceptable. But I think rather than hearsay from me, if it's acceptable to you, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we let Mr. Grzinski explain from his perspective and knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brzezinski, do you care to speak? Yep.
Yes, certainly that is, I believe, a legal option. The town could put forward in, let's just say, an a la carte fashion to have a list of 3 or 4 major changes to the charter, and the town could vote on each change. That is a possibility. It'd be less common an approach, but it is a possibility, and it's something that if the select board decided it wanted to take in that approach, we could speak with town council about setting up a series of articles, and then whatever ones were approved by town meeting could be put forward in a package sent to the state legislature for approval. But then the question would be, do you come back and you put each one individually on the ballot, or do you put them all together on the ballot? So these are all questions that would have to be worked out. But, you know, technically you could split into 20 articles if you wanted to. It's just, it's up to, you know, how much you want to break it out for individual decisions of town meeting.
Mr. Underhill, I would just care to let you know that I believe that the Finance Committee can I think we will discuss this in depth, and everybody will have their say on every part of it, and we will vote if we want to amend it or make a recommendation with a draft amendment to how it's written, then we will do that. So if there are parts of it that we do, I don't intend, unless I'm told otherwise, and I've also spoken to a few folks on this, I don't intend for us to have a yes or no, vote or discussion on this. I think we should read all of the elements on it and have a discussion of it so that the recommendation reflects all of our opinions and we vote on it. That may mean multiple votes within the Finance Committee. So that's how I intend to go forward with it.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be much like the budget. As you make changes to it, we've amended the select board budget when I was on the Finance Committee many times. And that's the budget that's voted. So as you find changes you'd want to make, the typical amendment process is, I think, the right way to go. So I think you're on the right track. Vote each section, understand each section, and then at town meeting, read it with the amendments you're putting in. My fear is if it's broken into multiple votes, and that's what Mike's going to have to find out. How do we have to put it on the ballot? And secondly, we can't break it in. We may not be able to we can't break it into multiple articles on town meeting warrant, I don't believe, at town meeting, unless it's presented on the warrant as multiple articles. It could be multiple votes on the same article, the way we've done budgets, where we vote, different sections of the budget at different points. But I don't know. There's some moderator questions. And if it really comes down to it needing to be multiple articles and it's able to be done, we'll have to discuss that before we close the warrant the second time.
Okay.
But I would think that taken as a whole with amendments is the way to approach it.
Well, I think this is good discussion. Let's not put the cart before the horse.
Okay.
Let's please keep going.
Okay. Town administrator is the next section.
Sorry.
Apologize.
sorry.
Ms. McGinnis.
My question is, if it comes to the ballot, is it up and down on one ballot issue, or do you check off?
I believe it would be up and down on one ballot issue unless these are presented as separate ballot issues at town meeting and then on the ballot, on the warrant, on the ballot. I believe that's going to be something that needs the town council to weigh in on.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would certainly say, and when I was speaking before, I meant it could be split out. If it was split out, that the select board would have to do that through multiple articles on the warrant. If it was presented in this one article format, then the up or down vote at the ballot would be a single question, yes or no.
With the amendments as made on town meeting floor factored in.
Correct.
And lastly, I'd like to ask, Mr. Schultz, you mentioned through the chair that having 5 members would allow you and another member to go to a meeting. Now, when you go to that meeting and speak, Mr. Schultz, are you speaking on behalf of the select board, or are the two of you speaking as individual residents?
Well, when we go and we speak, if we're deliberating at all, anything that can be construed as deliberation is the problem. So when I ask clarifications as what do you mean by, because there's a lot of acronyms thrown around, that's not deliberation. But if we were to discuss the merits of some zoning issue or some project or something else, and Aaron and I are both weighing in on the merits of that project, it could be construed as a violation of open meeting law because we're deliberating on something that could or would or is before the select board. So that's, clarification's one thing, asking and deliberating is different. Especially something that clearly relates to our charter, like growth in the town and planning in the town. I think if Aaron and I both went to a school committee meeting or something, where we don't have a say in it, that probably be a different situation, but something that would come before us. We are, at least in other legal decisions I've heard, perceived to be deliberating if we're discussing the merits of something that we'll be voting on or have voted on or could be voting on. So that's the fear.
As two of you,
Yes.
on a 5-member board or on a 3-member board?
On a 3-member board. On a 5-member board, have at it. We don't have a quorum. We're not having a deliberation with the quorum present without notifying the town, the whole bit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please proceed, and we are way off
Okay.
time schedule.
All right, I'll
but
go
this is
faster to
important.
the second part. Section 3, Article 4 is the longest section. It says town administrator. Our charter says that we will have a town administrator. Full stop. It didn't spell out job, didn't spell out detail, anything else. This is stolen from multiple towns, edited by our town council, and is in line and consistent with what most other towns have. This has been vetted through legal counsel. It's been compared to other town charters. I would suggest reading it over, and I'll be glad to come back and answer any specific questions you have about these as we get further, or Mr. Gazinski or the town attorney could come in to discuss them with you. But again, this is defining what a town administrator does. And most of it is work and actions that Mike is doing now, taken from job descriptions that he has, but put into the charter to be official. The other section 4-2, and Mr. Germain, I'm not sure we need Section A, because I think that's already in there. I think we already have the 1-year term for the moderator.
That's correct. It is not necessary.
So we probably wouldn't need to put that on this list.
That could be removed.
I'd remove that so we don't get into discussion about it. But the second part is town clerk. And this is probably, as Peter said, the most volatile issue. Town clerk shall be appointed as opposed to elected. And we did that in keeping with the role of the town clerk, the supervision that's needed. And we've had elected town accountants, we've had elected town treasurers, we've had other elected positions. And we've moved more and more of those into the appointed to give better control for the of the position and supervision of the position.
And it is consistent with many towns.
Yeah, most towns have appointed as opposed to an elected. And the one thing with the charter change, these changes we're talking about probably won't be revisited for at least 5 and probably 10 years. So these are changes we're planning to put in place that we will be living with for quite a while.
Is there a current?
If I may, I have one question about that
Go ahead,
section.
Mr. Underhill.
Mr. Schultz, just for clarity, would the appointment of the town clerk be for the same duration as the elected duration of the town clerk?
It would be appointed as a position, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Gazinski, is that right?
That's correct. It would not be a fixed term.
Right.
It would be like any other salaried department head.
Excuse me, at will.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or would they have a contract? But yes, an employee.
May I make one other comment? At that point, the town clerk would then be reporting to the town administrator. Right now, that doesn't occur. So the town clerk is an elected office that runs technically independent of the town administrator. This would give the town administrator and the other governing bodies a chance to review and add to what needs to be done within that office.
So that's the gist of it. That's the list that we put together. And I've heard your feedback on how to vote it. And I think this conversation with Donna and others and any changes, suggestions, or recommendations, we meet in 2 weeks, is it? Or we close the warrant? The warrant's closed, but we have to finish it and finalize and sign it in 2 weeks, right?
October 12th.
October 12th.
So any suggestions? I mean, if you want to change it to warrant and budget committee, we can discuss that. I mean, the goal is to try to get the easy ones consensus on and free up our discussion for section 4-2 and any other section that might need it.
Okay.
Quick
Ms.
question.
Boyardi.
I'm sorry, our town clerk right now is appointed?
Elected.
Elected.
She's
No, I think that I couldn't hear you very well, Mr. Chairman. The town clerk is
elected,
is
correct?
elected right now.
Right, and so you're wanting to change it to an appointment.
Correct.
So, and will that change the hours that the person will be working?
There would be mechanics involved in how that is done. It might be that we, and Mr. Gazinski could chime in on the staffing proposal, but it might be the clerk is 40 hours and we have a part-time assistant town clerk. Currently, the clerk is, I think by charter, 5 hours, and the or maybe 15, and the assistant town clerk is full-time. So there might be some changes on how it's structured.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yes, that would be it's that specific issue is not taken up in this charter review. That would be a separate discussion as to the needed hours in the office as part of a future budgetary discussion and operational review. But there's certainly possible that there could be changes in the hours and in time that person is in the office and the pay level.
Mr. Schultz, could you state what is the intent of the change?
To provide more accountability in the town clerk through direct supervision from the town administrator is the first part. The second part is to staff it appropriately. Right now, we have a part-time town clerk who with a full-time assistant, and we believe that's exactly backwards. We think an appointed full-time position who has part-timers working for them is more appropriate for the office.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Schultz?
I just have one more.
Go ahead.
It's a
Ms.
pleasure.
Boiardi. Ms.
Mr.
Boiardi.
Schultz, thank you. How is this appointment, how does this go about? How does the town clerk get appointed?
As every other position in town to be appointed, fire chief, police chief, there's applications received. Mr. Gazinski reviews them. He makes a hiring decision. The select board ratifies it. Generally, I mean, that's the broadest level. I don't know at these high level positions because we haven't had one while I've been there. We've had a lot of library pages, but I don't know if the select board or anybody else is involved in the interview process on something of this level, department head. Mr. Gazinski could explain that better.
Yes, Mr. Schultz pretty much got it exactly correct. It would be the same process used for other department head level positions, and it would be put forward to the board for ratification. And again, sometimes depending on the level of department head, we do have, sometimes a member of the select board that sits in on the final interviews. But it would certainly be an issue that would be through the regular appointment process as other department heads.
Well, currently we have as you said, a part-time town clerk, and we have a full-time assistant clerk. So those two people will be then applying for that position.
Well, I'm gonna defer that, and it's not germane to the actual, I think what I heard you say, Mike, is we're really talking about the structure and how it happens in terms of how the positions are filled. That's a down the road issue. It could be 2 years from now. So we can
Okay.
talk about it later, but at this point,
Sure.
we're over time, and
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes, you may.
If the current elected official will finish out her term?
I couldn't understand you, Kathy, I'm sorry.
So the question is, will the current elected official finish her term? And I believe it says that she will.
Yes. And just one other point on that, Mr. Chairman, and it'll be very brief.
Go ahead, be brief.
This is not something that we're talking about Lisa Harden in that position. As I said, the charter is 10 years out. This is not a change that it comes up during this review, and if we didn't have somebody as dedicated and wonderful and working as hard as her in that position, right now we have no protections. If somebody came in and walked in for 5 hours a week and didn't spend the extra overtime that Lisa's doing, we would not be in as good a position. So this is thinking 5, 10 years down. This is our chance to amend it because we won't have another chance for probably 10 years. That's it.
Why is that, Craig?
Charter review committees, the most we saw them ever meeting was once every 5 years. We went 20 years before we had a meeting. Charters, as I said, are the Constitution. It takes years to change them. It takes probably 2 years to, well, COVID came in. Let's say we do it in 1 year, then it takes about a year to get through the legislative and everything else process. So it's at least 2 years before change goes into effect from when you form the committee. Most of these committees meet once every 10 years is typically how a charter review committee is set up. We've gone just about 20, so we were due.
Thank you. Any last words or comments, Craig?
Nope, thank you for having me back.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome back. We're glad to have you. Okay, at this point, we're going to turn it over to Mr. McVeigh for discussion on stormwater bylaw regulation amendment. Mr. McVeigh. You are on mute. Bless you.
Good evening, this is John McGowan.
Hi, John, we can hear you.
Thank the committee and the chair. The article that's presented is an amendment to the stormwater regulations, and it would go into, it would be presented as an amendment to section 7(1)(b), and it would be added 10 in that section, and it would state, essentially, it would state setting the bottom floor elevation of buildings a minimum of 2 feet above seasonal high groundwater elevation.
Okay, I have all kinds of questions. Why, and please go into a little bit more detail as to what the benefit or what the reason is, what the rationale is for the change.
So the board at one of the meetings looked at this issue in a recent development, and were concerned that if you had new construction, new development where water would potentially intrude upon basements, that it would be deleterious to public health. Obviously, there are, some pumps and other methods available, passive and active methods available for control, but the determination was that allowing for the separation was the most prudent step in this scenario. We did consult with the town's engineering consultant Beta, and we've had meetings on this, and just some of the pros that were listed as from the town's consultant engineer who has indicated that this amendment is not uncommon. Towns such as Billerica, Bridgewater, I think our neighboring Westwood have this similar type of added addition to the regulations, the groundwater and stormwater regulations. As for pros, it would allow less impact to groundwater elevation and natural hydrology. And this is directly from Beta. Eliminate the need for some pumps and foundation drains. Often the discharge from these pumps is directed to roadways, causing icing and paving deterioration. Can save future homeowners the headache of basement flooding. Some pumps that don't work properly, especially during power outages, obviously wood property damage, health and safety issues related to flooding basements and subsequent mold and so forth. Also reduce the runoff from a project. I would add as well that the potential for groundwater pollution is lessened in this scenario from chemicals that might be in basements, oil tanks and so forth that might leak and impact groundwater. So those are some of the pros that are attached to this proposed article amendment to the stormwater regulations.
John, this is Pete Berube still. So in your, I just want you to affirm that when you say bottom floor elevation of buildings, you in fact are talking about basements. So no basement would be built with less than 2 feet above the groundwater elevation, you know, the seasonal high.
Yeah, a foundation.
Okay?
If clarification is needed on that exact definition, I'd have to.
No, I just want to, no, just mainly for me, because sometimes you could be referring to the livable space or the finished space, but you've confirmed it includes the basement. Has anybody, what is the impact to developable land if this change is made? In other words, what would we see? I'm not sure if it's quantity-wise, you know, how many unbuilt space, how much unbuilt acreage becomes, you know, undevelopable because the groundwater table is, say, 2 feet. If it's 2 feet below surface, then you're not going to get a basement, which then means that the only way you're going to develop it is to build, you know, slab on grade, essentially. What is the general impact to what we would see for development in Millis if this passes?
John, maybe I can answer that for you.
Well, I'll go to you in a second, but I'm
Yep.
going to give Mr. McVeigh a swing at it.
Yeah, I would have to defer to an expert or someone has more knowledge in that field. I couldn't directly answer that
Okay.
question.
That's no problem. Mr.
You know, Peter, it would be better to answer that type of question, but I just simply don't have that knowledge at this point.
That's fine. Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the development in question is over on Ridge Street, Emerson Place, and that's where most of this discussion came up. There's, out of the 48 homes, you're looking at, I believe, John, was it 5 homes that are being built at the end of a cul-de-sac that would affect that 48 homes. So acreage-wise, you wouldn't know until the developer actually came in. So no one knows that answer quite yet until the land is looked at and can be developed. So I think if you look at the Emerson Place development, they're looking at, I think, 5 homes are going to be affected by this bylaw out of the 40-something homes.
And so there's, just kind of seeing it through, likely the option again would be slab on grade, and that would cause there to be a need for a bigger footprint as you need to have mechanical space, you know, not your HVAC system, your electrical panels, all that stuff is now not going in the basement. Now it's going into some sort of utility closet, which is either going to cause you to have a bigger footprint or smaller living space, or both. And I just want to make sure, I want to see that those impacts have been discussed and hear the opinions on that discussion.
That it has, I know that Beta has looked at it. In most of these, you could use fill to build up the houses, and you would still have the walkout basements that could still be built around them. But again, I think this is a great question that we could have to move forward. We're going to have, because we're going to have the engineer come in and speak more professionally to give the exact correct answers on this.
Okay, all right. Any comments or questions from the committee or audience? Mr. Stedman, please.
I have a couple questions. Is there currently a
John.
standard?
John,
Yeah, just leave.
it's pushed to mute.
It's on.
Oh,
Okay.
it's on, okay. Is there currently a standard? You say 2 feet. Is there any standard at all right now?
Yeah, go ahead, John. I mean, that's,
Well, like I mentioned before, Beta has indicated that towns that they're aware of, Billerica, Bridgewater, and Westwood, have standards of the 2 foot
That's not what he asked.
conditions or criteria.
So we have no standard now. It's not 0, it's not 1 foot or something. So
Is it 4 feet? Is it 6? What is it right now? Or is it, you know, mute? There's no guidance on it right now.
Yeah, I defer that to Beta as well, but my understanding is there's none at the present time, but I couldn't be quoted on that one, only because I think you have the ability to use sump pumps and/or passive methods
French
to
drains.
control groundwater.
Okay.
Okay. The other question I think you alluded to is when would this become effective? Because Emerson Place is already kind of approved and in process. So this affects current development as well as future development, is that correct?
Mr. McKay, please.
Yeah, no, that, it would be for future developments going forward. Once a bylaw is put in place or regulations put in place, it's for, new development.
So one that's already in process would not be affected, is that correct?
I don't believe that unless the meeting's in November, so before that's a Board of Health question. It's going to be regulated by them. It's going to be under there, even though it's a bylaw, not a bylaw, it's a stormwater, it's in their regulation, so they're going to have to manage it.
Question.
Ms. Boyardi.
So, but Emerson Place is already in effect, and you're saying that they are under construction, and you're saying that there are 5 homes that could be affected by that, or 5 lots. How is that going to financially impact them, though, if we all of a sudden approve this? I mean, then they're going to have
It
to,
doesn't affect them,
does it affect them?
no.
So I
Why?
think the chair asked the question, how many homes, or percentage of Millis homes would be affected by that? And the answer that I gave was that in that development, there would be 5 homes. Now, whether they're going to be put under this regulation, I can't answer that question. So I don't know if they will be affected by this. But I know it was between 5 and, there was a number given by Beta to us when this was presented to us of what would be affected in that development if the regulation is in place. So I don't think you can go back. They already have a planning board decision, so
Yeah, I think we're going down a road that wasn't necessarily, that's, my question was of the land that is currently undeveloped in Millis and could be in the future zoned for development, what percentage of that acreage is potentially affected by this? And I understand that's not a number that anybody has off the top of their head, but I do think it's something worth looking at. And just to wrap this up, I'm going to ask that the technical expert who recommended this, I think you've said it's Bader, we'll ask that they come in and either dial in or come in and maybe answer some more of these questions. Any more questions for or on this particular topic?
I just
Ms.
have
McGinnis.
I'm sorry to
No problem.
linger on. Homes now in areas like this have sub pumps, and I think it would be proactive for the Board of Health to have protections for new homeowners in town that don't have to deal with sump pumps and water in their basement 2 weeks after they've purchased a home. This 2 feet above high water table is very common all around us. And seeing as Millis is 2/3 underwater, this could happen down the road. And if you ever see a house that has maybe 15 stairs going to the first floor, from the front of the house to the first floor, chances are they've got a high water table because the basement has to be 2 feet above. You can still have a cellar, but it's going to be, you're highly elevated. So I truly support this for future homeowners in Millis.
Oh, I
Thank
do
you.
too. I just wondered how that impacted.
Okay. Any last questions? I'm going to ask, we did have somebody dial in. I can see them on the bottom, and I'm just going to ask that they mute their mic because we can hear a little, I assume it's from that number, so a little interference. 774 873 4078. Looks like a phone number. If you could just mute your mic, please. Thank you. Okay?
Unless they want to talk.
Unless they want to talk, actually, they can't. It's not an open meeting. Maybe that's the wrong terminology, but, so if you're on the agenda, you can talk, but, okay,
Can
next.
we ask a question about
I don't know.
something?
I don't know. We'll cross that if it comes up. Okay, thank you, Mr. McVeigh and Mr. McKay for helping us out. And next, Terry Consalves for the Senior Work Program Abatement Adjustment. And I think she is the Assistant Assessor on our screen.
I dialed in the
Very good. Thank you.
microphone on my computer doesn't work, so I dialed in by phone. This is Terry for the Senior Work Program.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Right, we need to present this article before town meeting to change what the seniors can earn in the Senior Work Program. Currently, they're earning the state minimum wage of $13.50 an hour for $1,350 a year. The state allows them to make up to $1,500 a year, but an article needs to go to town meeting for them to do that.
Number 6.
And the $1,500 is the maximum the state allows a person to earn on the Senior Work Program.
Thank you, and a quick question. I think at the bottom of the article, it says the total amount to be used in the program will not exceed $31,500 in any given fiscal year. I believe that to intend to say that the town will not, in total, the town will not give abatements or tax work credits over that amount. So that's the total town budget. If you could just affirm that and,
Yes.
and perhaps
Yes.
that gets clarified going forward, because it's just a little vague right now. Anyway, I understand this. I don't have any questions. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay.
If I may.
Mr. Underhill, you may.
Yes, this is a great program, and I know it also extends to veterans in town who get a tax work abatement. Would this also include them?
The veterans are already able to earn $1,500 due to the way that the federal law was done. So they already have that ability.
Great, thank you.
A follow-on question, if I may, that spurned by Mr. Underhill's question is, are those annual limits for the town between the Veterans Program and the Seniors Program separate, or are they the same? I'm getting a separate from the town finance director.
They're separate programs. The Veterans Program works under the Veterans, and the Senior Program works under the Council of Aging.
Thank you for clarifying.
Council on Aging.
Okay. Anything else that you have for us, Terry?
No, I think that's it. I just want to make sure that, I would like to know that the Finance Committee will back this request.
Well, we will be discussing it. We will be discussing it
After
further,
you've
but
discussed it,
we will certainly give you
after you've
feedback.
discussed it,
And
that would be great.
the general feedback is that we are in support of this, but we won't know until we vote it. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Mr. McKay, PFAS water treatment plant.
Thank you. I'll be as quick as anything. If I could just give a good kudos to Terry in that program. As Mr. Underhill just stated, as a recipient of many workers under the both programs, it's invaluable to the town. The resources that we get for this is just phenomenal. The expertise from people. So I'll end on that. So the update on the PFAS, as I told you last week, we were waiting from your last meeting for the cost estimate for the building of the PFAS treatment plant. We did receive that late Thursday afternoon. It was shared with the select board and discussed briefly Monday night and at the meeting last night. So the total cost for the treatment plant that we will be going at town meeting is $5,590,000. And I think you get the breakdown of the building costs, and that pretty much covers everything, engineering. I was kind of surprised last night that nobody was shocked as much as I was, but to me, it's a lot of money. It's an awful lot of money to treat a man-made substance, and I still cannot figure out how it got from above ground a couple of 100 feet down into a drinking water system, and hopefully we're going to be able to prove that in this process.
Mr. McKay, would you speak briefly about the timeline and the things that,
Sure.
and also so you alluded to last night we had a capital planning committee meeting where Mr. McKay, which I was in attendance, Mr. McKay briefed the capital planning committee. He alluded that we weren't that surprised. I think the number that we were tracking on the capital planning committee tally of capital items was like 5.4, 5.5. So there was a bit of, lack of a better word, a preamble from Mr. McKay prepping us for what was coming, and it was 5.6. So I think we were all rather pessimistic and thought that the number was coming in, largely or more largely above what he just told us, $5.59 million, which is not insignificant. But if you could please talk about the timeline, also some of the status of the wells, very briefly, because I know that we've taken another well temporarily offline, not for PFAS, but it does raise the criticality of this.
Sure. So we're looking at, for this to, if approved at town meeting, we would put it out to bid over the winter months, and it would, we would start with an early, once it's approved, we can actually start, demolition of the two buildings that are in place, the old dog shelter, and I think it was an old water building. It's still on the same site as the DPW, so there's no purchase of land that needs to be made or anything like that. So we can start that over the winter months. It's the ordering of the 8, I think it's 8 tanks that will go in place to treat the water. That will be placed, the order will be placed. That's not a holdup, but we think that could be the longest delay of getting that equipment in. The rest of the equipment, it's all readily purchasable. I mean, we can buy it right away and have it in place. The construction, we would be looking at early spring, and hopefully, not around this time, or if not early 2023, we would hopefully have it online. I explained to the committee last night that we're faced with one of our chemical feeds at well number 4 gave out over the past week. And once the day tank ran out of that chemical, we had no chemical, and the delivery of it is not coming till tomorrow. So right now the town is running on well number 3 and number 6. So that's a far cry for what we can produce. I mean, we can produce almost 4 million gallons of water a day. But with having wells 1 and 2 offline, and possibly the thought of ever leaving them offline forever could be not a good thing for the town. I don't think anybody's going that way, but so I think that's a brief synopsis of what we want to do. We want to have it online, hopefully by early 2023. And I would ask that if, for a brief explanation, Kleinfelder, when they get the 100% design, which should be in the next 2 weeks, I would ask that maybe we could either have a joint meeting with everybody just to get everything out on the table, and the public can hear the design and the cost.
Okay. Mr. McKay, thank you. We'll have probably a couple more questions. I just want to say last night I did ask Jim about whether there would be an operational or an O&M budget impact with a new facility. His answer, and he can opine more, but his answer was no, that they already possess the skills and labor necessary to operate the plant. And my follow-up is there any O&M, non-personnel dollar expenses that would come from operating this, whether it be replacement of filters or different chemicals or disposal of hazardous waste or what have you? What are the O&M budget impacts beyond personnel?
Right, good question. And what would be first off is the reduction of the air stripper. That would be taken offline. There would be no need of it. So that would be a large reduction in electrical. And there'd be no same chemicals would be used there. So there would be the filters. I believe the filters are good for many years and replacement out 5-10 years, but they would have to be flushed out. So we'd have to take them out and clean them out on a regular basis, maybe once or twice a year. And that, again, that would be done during staff time. It wouldn't be done after hours. It wouldn't have to be done, we'd just be able to take a couple of the, the digesters offline at a time. Chemicals, I would have to wait and see what, the Kleinfelder people would be able to report and give you a better answer for that.
Thank you. Okay. Any more questions for Mr. McKay from the audience? Mr. Stedman.
Out of curiosity, what's the status of well number 5?
I'm sorry, well number 5, it's just, well number 5 and well number 6, they're, right now we're under a moratorium with the, because it's not September 30th yet. So because of the Charles River and the agreement to let the wells run through the summer, the town administrator and myself signed not a deal, a redefinition of the water permit that we have, that we would only run well 5 or 6 at a time. Well 5 and 6, they're in perfect condition. They're our newest wells. And actually, the update I give you on well 3, we still haven't received the test results for well number 3 for PFAS. And over the summer, we kept an average of the 15 to 16 each month. It was 17, 16, 15 going down. And once I get the results for well number 3 for the month of September, I'll report that right away. So we have to test well number 3 monthly because it's over the 10 parts per trillion, and the other wells are tested quarterly because there is PFAS in every single well that we have. Luckily, well 4, 5, and 6, they're below the 10 parts per trillion. Well 5 is around the 9 parts. When the last time we had it online, we will test well 6 before we take it off for the winter and turn on well 5. And that's around, I think that was around 7 parts per trillion. In well number 4, which is up at South End Farm, which you would think that, you'd think it would be the highest, where it was all farmland one day. That's the lowest. That's right around 4 parts per trillion.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
If I may, I have a question for Mr. McKay.
Mr. Andriel.
On the price breakdown sheet, I'm a little confused. If we can go into the Division 2 site work, like just from my work experience, 8-inch iron ductile pipe, that's 500 feet, that's $200 per linear foot. Is that installed or is that the materials cost?
No, I believe that will be installed.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you. And wanted to double check that. The other question is the asbestos and lead abatement for existing structures. Are you confident that we've captured everything we need to in testing for this project? I'm thinking of the police station. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to run into any unforeseen lead or asbestos issues.
Yeah, so they just finalized that report before this was done. So they've been out there. They had their engineers that tested both buildings, and test borings around the building were done. Luckily, when the DPW project was being done, there was many test borings done around. Analysis were done for that, and they also went even further. With this project, we just finished a whole round of borings just yesterday. So we're going to get those results before. And actually, Craig's on the permanent building committee. He can tell you that this is probably one of the, every time we open our mouth, we jinx ourselves. This is one of the cleanest sites that we're built on. We had no issues with the DPW site, and we feel the same up there also, because it's in the general area.
Thank you.
Okay. Any seconds? All right, Mr. McKay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
as always.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
You too, Jim.
Mr. Kaczynski and Select Board, if we could just do a very quick draft warrant review.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just make a quick run through, and then I'll defer to the members of the board that want to add anything to that. But just to take a little step back, I did go over most of these articles with the committee. I think at your last meeting, we have a couple new articles. Also want to point out the obvious that I think we do have some gaps in Articles 1, 2, 3, and 5, which should be pretty much filled in by this time next week. Insofar as, we should have most of the relevant information there, with a possible exception of the capital, which we should have the recommendations of capital. So we should be able to put some framework into that. Other than that, without rehashing the articles that we already went over last week, we do have, I believe, 2 new articles on there that I just want to touch base on with the committee. Article 10 is a similar article that you saw in the spring for tree pruning and removal. We still have a large number of trees along our roadways that need work. We do get calls on a regular basis from citizens that are concerned about trees on their street near their property that we're trying to get to as quickly as possible in conjunction with the DPW director and the tree warden. So that's another 40,000 we're requesting to continue that work. And the other new article is Article 15, I believe, which is new from when you met last week, which was requested by the town treasurer. This is the rescinding of debt for 3 prior debt authorizations. So just want to be clear on this. There is no money available. These are funds that were never borrowed. So this is simply debt authorization that we're cleaning off the books at the recommendation of our auditors and and when we do go out to borrow, we don't want to show this debt on our books. Or this debt potential on our books. So those are the two new articles, and those 3 projects that are listed there are all projects that are complete, and we simply don't need that funding. So I don't know if I guess I would, Mr. Chair, defer it to members of the select board if they have any other comments on the draft.
I would like to hear from the Select Board if they have anything to offer.
I don't have any further comments.
Yeah, we're waiting for the numbers on those last items, just like you. And I just think the one thing that Mike mentioned that needs to be stressed is Article 15 is not reducing taxes or giving us new money back. That's money that was never borrowed. So it's just, again, one of those housekeeping issues that needs to be taken care of.
Okay. Mr. Jermaine?
He has left us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add that, so the Capital Planning Committee met last night. We're scheduled to meet again next week, 4th, I think. It'll be posted, no doubt. And we will finish we had presentations last night by just about anybody that was responsible for a capital request. There are several sizable ones coming. The 3 most notable are obviously the PFAS water treatment plant, the replacement for Engine 1 fire truck, and then, Mike, what was the 3rd one that I'm forgetting?
The ambulance?
The ambulance. There's a replacement for an ambulance. So those are all getting discussed. Their priority and thank you, Ms. Underhill. They're getting discussed, they're getting ranked, and likely I will present on behalf of Mr. Barry to the committee next week, as he is unavailable, and I think I'm not sure if I'm officially the vice chairman of that committee or not, but why not? I'm active in that committee, and I'll be here, and he cannot, and he's done a great job, and I'm happy to help him out. So there are several. The one comment that I made last night, this is a good opportunity for the select board to hear it, is we've been talking, many of us have been talking about improving the sidewalks in town. And there's yet to be a capital request come before the capital planning committee for sidewalk work. I believe there's a sidewalk fund, so it's not even as if we're vying for free cash, which I think we should, but I don't think we even need to. I think there's, I've been told there's like $50,000 in a sidewalk fund. So I urge anybody that can, and I think the answer is the DPW needs to propose a project for sidewalks, whether they be improvements or new sidewalks. This town needs both, in my opinion. And I'll be advocating for that, and I'll be advocating for it just about over many other things that are on the capital planning committee's docket right now in terms of projects to be funded at fall town meeting for free cash. Trees and, I've actually talked to Brutus about this, about why not do both, trees and sidewalks at the same time. Brutus is doing a fantastic job advocating for the things that he's responsible for as the tree warden. I just think we need help. Somebody needs to advocate for sidewalks a little bit more effectively, and so I'm off my soapbox right now, but we need some money allocated to sidewalks, and I'd like to see the select board and this committee take it up and propose it and recommend it for funding at this meeting. So, any more comments on the warrant or anything that I just said? Now's the time.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Underhill.
if there are no further questions for us, would we be able to have a moment to adjourn our select board meeting?
Certainly.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn the select board meeting.
Second, so it's been moved and seconded to adjourn the select board meeting. Mr. Schultz?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. So we are now adjourned. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you both for coming.
Thanks.
That could change. So one of the questions that one of the members just asked me is, where is the ambulance? And so
Right.
there will be separate, depending on the borrowing level of, for instance, the fire engine and the PFAS plant, those would end up being separate articles. The ambulance, I don't see on here. It would, so it's.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, just wanted to say, I mean, we certainly may need the ambulance on there. It was more an issue on whether there was enough free cash available to be able to do that without a borrowing. But that is a very iffy question, and we do not have an exact number of free cash yet. So I would certainly say that by this time next week, we should have an answer to the question as to whether or not we're going to need a separate article for the ambulance. It is certainly needed, there's no question in my mind, but it's just a matter of whether that is encapsulated within the capital article, or whether, again, it has its own article, just like the fire engine.
Mike, please clarify, because if it were intended to be considered during this fall town meeting, it would be a borrowing and it would need its own article, no?
Yes, if it's a borrowing, it would need, yes, you're correct, it would need its own article.
So
We
so
will
then
have
the
a definitive answer on that, we should by this time next week.
So wouldn't the select board then need to reopen the warrant, add it, and then close the warrant? They can't just add an
Yes,
article.
yes, and they would do that at the meeting on the 12th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully everybody's following that. Just trying to keep us moving, and I apologize if I'm
No, it's great.
being quick.
You're doing great.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Sedman.
When the fire engine comes up, I think it would be very helpful if this committee could see what the lease and debt payments have been for fire equipment for the last 3 years and the next 5 going forward. so that we can put it in context.
Sure.
So if we had that information at the same time, it might expedite the discussion.
Thank you. And I will let, we will let Chief Barrett know about that, and I'm sure Ms. Johnston can help us as well. I don't want to, I'll just give you a little bit of insight in terms of what the fire truck for the replacement for engine 1. I think that apparatus, if I remember properly, I'm not looking at my notes, is like 31 years old.
Right.
And the big piece that I think Chief Barrett was trying to convey to us last night, and he'll do the same when he comes, if he comes to speak with us, is that the lead time on that fire engine is, well, you were there last night, forgive me, is
At least a year.
485 days. So from the time that that thing has authorization to order, I'm not even sure how the appropriation would happen, what fiscal year it would be. It would be borrowing, so it would happen, and it's $750,000 that we're talking about in terms of the price tag on a fire engine. But 485 days, and that I can, just from the tone and tenor of his voice, is that something that concerns him, keeping that piece of equipment online. So anyway, we'll talk about that more next week. Okay, let's see. Old biz. I think I'm skipping over something. Discussion and assignment of finance committee liaisons to boards and committees. I'm going to defer that. I'm going to exercise my prerogative to defer it, and in all honestly, it's because it has passed me by once again. That is I take responsibility for that, and I'll make sure that it gets on. I will discuss with Ms. Kabibo and get the up-to-date roster, and we'll have a discussion on that for next week. So please forgive me. We'll do that next week. Old business, new business, if there is any. Ms. Johnston. Your lead? Oh, I thought you had free cash that you were going to let us know. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Okay, no old business or new business heard. We'll move on to the next agenda item.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes approve the minutes from last week.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the September 22nd Finance Committee meeting. Discussion. We're gonna go through roll call vote. Ms. Garzon.
Aye.
That's an aye. Ms. Boyardi.
Aye.
Mr. Borgman.
Aye.
Ms. McGinnis.
Aye.
Ms. Reyes.
Aye.
Mr. Stedman.
Aye.
Mr. Underhill.
Aye.
Mr. Berube. Aye. Okay. Thank you. Really quick before we adjourn, or before I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, next week's meeting will be, so we're on for the 6th, we're on for the 13th. We'll likely have meetings, keep us on track for every Wednesday from here to, till right up to Fall Town Meeting. I'm not sure if we'll have to add another one or not. I really like to make sure that we would vote on virtually everything. I would like to do as much as we can during next week's meeting, the 6th. We'll actually finish our discussions and vote the warrant, make our recommendations from the Finance Committee. And the reason that I want to do that is because I know that the Select Board is going to vote theirs likely and have their discussion prior, I think on the 12th. And so I would like to make sure that our recommendations are considered during their deliberations and their vote. Not that they have to, because that wouldn't be precedent setting that they didn't have our recommendation prior to their votes, but I think that's the best way for us to influence and be considered, is to work with them and give them our recommendations, including, as we discussed tonight, the Charter Committee. So I anticipate next week will be a long meeting. So just gear up, bring some snacks, do whatever you have to do. Make sure your battery's charged up if you're at home. Okay, that said.
I actually have a question, Pete, sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
So would you like me to, should I invite the chiefs next week? Chief Safire reached out to me and asked, should he attend this week's meeting? Would the committee like to hear from the chiefs as what their requests are?
I will contact you tomorrow on that. And likely the answer is going to be yes. And if anybody else wants to give an opinion, I mean, I've always been inclusive and tried to get as much information in front of us. You know, I think I'm telling you, it's going to be a long meeting next week. Plan on 3 hours. I mean, so yes, and we'll try to get them up front, Deirdre, but I will call you tomorrow based on the notes that I took last night. There's some that I think we have plenty of information. Obviously, the big ticket item, absolutely, I feel like we ought to hear from Chief Barrett directly. This committee ought to hear from them directly, not filtered through the CPC or through me. I know Chief Safire is requesting a vehicle replacement. Happens all the time, as it should, because he schedules he plans his out, but I think we ought to hear from him. We've heard from Mr. McKay, so I'll review it and I will correspond with you tomorrow, Deirdre.
Okay,
But
just
yeah-
want to make sure.
Yep, and don't wait for me to invite Chief Barrett. Please just invite him. But if there's any others, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Stedman.
in light of what you just said, the next meeting being very long, and we're now down to just the members of FinCom,
Yes.
is this a good time to discuss the name change of this committee?
We certainly can, yeah. We're ahead of schedule, and I don't mean to cut us off, so.
You want to go home?
No,
I just figured it might.
No,
might
it's a
save
great
some time
idea. I
next
could
time.
do a few of them.
go right ahead.
No, same here.
Go right ahead.
Well, my personal opinion on that is one of the reasons that this committee appealed to me was the name Finance in it. Because it has to do ultimately with the town finances and the tax rate. And having a better understanding of that and a say in it is one of the reasons why I volunteered to be on this committee. Whereas the warrant committee, while for people that are very involved, is much more descriptive. Especially for people who have not been involved in Massachusetts government or lived in Massachusetts government. They may not know what the heck a warrant is. So that's my 2 cents. I don't think it's a critical issue. I don't think most of the public will understand it. But I think finance has a certain pizzazz to it. And I know what Mr. Schultz said, that it scared away people because they think it's all numbers. But
To me, it's, if I may, I don't want to cut you off. I tend to agree with you. I think, to me, I came from a government background. I was in the service for 20 years and dealt with public works and town, for lack of a better, comparison of what I actually did. It was really like being a town administrator, or town manager, city manager. And so it's not so much the numbers, the X's and O's and the dollar signs and the decimal points. It's really the principle behind how you spend the money and where the money goes. And to me, anybody can do that, especially once they gather a little bit of experience and they know the process, they understand the process, because that is important, and it's easy to get lost in if you haven't gone through the whole cycle a couple times, frankly. So when I first heard the name change to Warrant Committee, I thought to myself, well, why do we need to be described as the Warrant Committee? If that's the case, I don't think the general public generally or necessarily needs our recommendation or a volunteer committee's recommendation on just issues like referendums that don't involve finance or budget. If it's whether we're going to allow marijuana in town, or whether we're going to change different zoning and things like that, they can read those things and they can listen to discussion. But I'm not in favor of a name change for name change's sake, and I'm not in favor of it for fear. Initially, I wasn't in favor of it for fear that it could confuse some people as to, well, what happened to the finance committee? They do hear finance. If you are involved in town meetings and you go to them, you do know that the finance committee does a lot of the speaking, and they give a recommendation, and maybe and we all have circles that whether we talk our, what we do with our volunteer time or within our community, I talk to my friends and say, oh, this is coming up, and we debated this, and, if they ask me for my opinion, I give it to them. I do think that there is some merit to potentially, if you're going to change it to warrant and budget committee, or warrant and finance committee, one of those, versus a straight up warrant committee.
Yeah.
I think I'm in Kathy's school in the sense that I do think it is valuable to find out what other towns are doing, but to me, it's not my compass. I think we can be unique, and I don't think this is that unique as to whether we change it, but I don't necessarily want to be a follower as to what other towns are doing. We should look to them, but then we should decide what works for us, so.
Warrant sounds bureaucratic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know, as I said, I wasn't a fan of warrant from the very get-go. And again, it could be the finance warrant committee, because then but I don't see the reason to change it. It's not broken.
Sarah?
I agree. I don't think the name change is needed. I think it's fine as it is.
Were you intimidated to join because you thought it was all finance?
Initially I was, but then when I understood what the position was, you just gotta read, really, figure it out.
Into the microphone.
If you wanted to be a part of a committee, any committee in town, your responsibility is to find out what that committee actually does, as opposed to just looking at the name and going, oh, I can't do that.
Right.
So I don't think the name matters. I think if you just keep it finance committee, or finance and warrant, or whatever, but keep the finance in the name. That's what we do.
Thank you. Any Jim Borgman or Peter or Jody? And I have nothing to add as a fine response. I just want to make sure that we cover everybody.
No, I feel the general conversation almost doesn't matter what they call us as long as we do our job. But I think, the finance and warrant committee does kind of more encompass what I'm seeing we do here.
Right.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly either way. Yeah, I've had discussions with Craig about this, and we've discussed this in our committee, so I don't have a whole lot to add. It's not a hill I care to die on either, so I'm willing to, be flexible on whichever way the committee feels.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a preference either, but I think, Pete, you mentioned regardless, we need to educate the town around what the committee does. I think that would be helpful.
Okay. All right. So furthering our discussion and using our time a little bit more, a little bit better, on that particular article, the warrant, or the charter committee changes. So that's Article 8. And just to talk process, it is my intent that we would go through this and consider each of the sections or articles that they are considering changing. So I'm using the same term that we're talking about, but we're talking about Article 9 of the warrant Article 9. But underneath that, they're talking about changing Article 3, the executive branch, changing the name of the Board of Selectmen, etc. So please don't get confused. But
Right.
So in terms of the presiding officer, sorry, to get away from specifics, to talk about my recommendation and how I would like to proceed with this is for us to go through it, not necessarily line by line, but at least section by section, article by article, and come up with a finance committee position in whole. If they want to keep it as a whole, because that's how others do it, that's how the state legislature is more likely to take it up in a timely fashion, which I happen to agree with. If we don't like the idea of being bureaucratic, we'll wait until this kicks off and it goes from a town meeting town meeting vote to the legislature taking it up and then coming back here to Millis for it to become a ballot issue, then, the more we chop it up, the longer it's gonna take, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that,
I believe it goes town meeting, ballot, legislature.
I think it's the other way around.
Yeah,
But
town meeting.
nonetheless,
Yeah,
You think
and
the
what-
legislature goes before the ballot?
yes.
Yeah, and what we're talking about is just section,
And
right
that's-
now,
and that's
2-8.
primarily because that's what I wrote down. That's what I thought I heard. I thought I heard that it goes
It-
to, go ahead.
It's my understanding from the assistant town clerk that once it's passed at town meeting, then it goes to the legislature.
Okay, thank you.
And if they approve it, then it comes back and has to go to a ballot vote.
I stand corrected, thank you.
It's no problem. It doesn't matter. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter either way to me. I just think that regardless of the sequence, if it were different ballot items, say this is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Wow.
6 different, 7,
Yeah,
8, up to 8 different items, I think that process gets drawn out, or perhaps it gets put in peril. I think it's best if we considered each section or article or proposal for change, and if we like it, we leave it as is. And when I say we like it, I say let's vote it. Let's vote it as a committee, and then if we don't like it and we want to recommend amendment, then we craft that and we send it back to them. And that's exactly what we did last spring
that's good.
for the capital items in the budget, where we told them we aren't happy with how you allocated some of the available funds. We want you to put more back into the enterprise fund, and here's our recommendation. And lo and behold, they did it. They didn't have to, but they did. And that's, that was, it wasn't ugly, it happened, and I think, the best outcome when you collaborate and you discuss, hopefully you get the best outcome. No guarantees, but I think that's the best probability for the outcome that we're looking for.
So, Mr. Chair, is the board committee in a position to vote up or down the section 2.8 regarding the finance committee, or would you like to do them all at once?
So I'd like to go, we don't necessarily have to finish it tonight, but I'm happy to start with
That'd be great.
section 2.7, presiding officer. Please just take a moment to read that, and we'll do this will be our vote internal vote on that particular section 2-7 presiding officer, and then we'll go down, and if somebody wants to make an amendment or a motion, we'll take it, and then we'll proceed the whole way through, as far as we get, and
As
then
far as we
roll
get
it
till
up.
9, that sounds good.
Anybody opposed to that?
No.
Okay, so section 2-7 presiding officer, by adding the language, I mean, you could read it as well as I'll take a motion.
I move we accept that?
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept section 2-7 presiding officer, which states, by adding the language, the moderator may appoint a deputy moderator at their discretion if they are not able to attend a town meeting. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor, all those present in the room in favor, say aye.
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 Mr. Underhill.
Aye.
Mr. Borgman.
Aye.
Ms. Garzone.
Aye.
Okay, so that passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair? Oh.
Ms. McGinnis.
Regarding section 2-8, Finance Committee, by changing the title of quote, Finance Committee, quote, to quote, Warrant Committee, quote, I make a motion that the Finance Committee dismiss this section 2.8.
Second?
That's what I was waiting for. It's been moved and seconded that we dismiss section 2-8 Finance Committee outright. Discussion. So again, my only comment is I have no problem dismissing it. If we were to keep it, my recommendation would be to rename the Finance Committee the Warrant and Budget Committee. That is just a discussion point. Any further discussion?
I'd be happy with Finance and Warrant.
Correct. I would too. Finance and Warrant Committee. Or
Any-
Warrant and Finance Committee, but I
Yes,
want to
I
keep
think
finance
those two
in there.
words. Yes,
Any
it's a
further-
continuity.
Any further discussion? Okay, so right now, we're gonna vote on the current motion, which is to dismiss it. So if you vote yay, you're voting to dismiss it. A no vote obviously would do not be dismiss it, and then we can take it up for further discussion. I'll let everybody just kind of think that for a minute.
May I-
And
If we dismiss it, does that mean it remains finance or
goes
our recommendation would be that they take this out of Article 9.
okay.
Okay, so, all those present, I'll just do roll call, it's fine. Ms. Reyes,
Aye.
Ms. Boyardi,
Aye.
Mr. Berube, nay. Ms. McGinnis,
I'm sorry, may
Aye.
would you repeat we're dismissing,
a yay vote is to dismiss. A no vote is to either leave it as is, or we'll take up, another recommendation or
may
or
I
amendment.
rescind may I say nay?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Ms. McGinnis,
Yay.
Mr. Stedman,
Nay.
I had you as nay. Mr. Borgman,
Nay.
Mr. Underhill,
Nay,
as a nay.
excuse me, nay,
Nay.
sorry.
Ms. Garzon,
Nay.
all right, so the current motion does not pass. Would anybody like to either make an amendment or we'll just leave it as is? If nobody makes a motion right now, we're gonna leave the recommendation as it stands right now, which is to change it to Warrant Committee.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I propose we change the recommended name to Finance and Warrant Committee.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend the language in the warrant, Article 9, to Section 2-8, Finance Committee, by changing the title of Finance Committee to Finance and Warrant Committee. Discussion. So now we'll go to a vote. A yay vote would be in favor of the amendment. A nay vote obviously would be against it. Ms. Reyes,
Yay.
Ms. Boyardi,
Yay.
Mr. Berube, yes. Ms. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Stedman,
Yes,
Mr. Borgman,
Nay.
Mr. Underhill,
Aye,
and Ms. Garzon.
Aye.
Okay, so that passes. So we will we will communicate to them
our recommendation.
at the end of this, what our recommendation would be for the Finance and Warrant Committee. All right. Next is Article 3, Executive Branch. So this, just a little dialogue, you can see it. I'm not sure how many people have taken the time to read this or had time to read this. Changing the number of members of the Select Board as follows, basically 3 to 5.
Yeah.
And then spacing out when that happens to make sure that there's a new member or a turnover every year.
I move that we accept this.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to accept the changes to Article 3 Executive Branch as written. Discussion.
If I may,
You may.
I have a vested interest in making the select board an easier job for all the members, but I feel this is a major modification to a branch of our government, and I think this should be separated from this article and be a standalone article. I mean, I'm willing to be convinced, talk to me about it, but, everything else seems to be minor housekeeping items, but I mentioned earlier, this and the clerk are major changes to how our town's going to operate, and I feel they should be their own separate standalone articles. I don't care if it's hard or if it takes longer. I just want to make sure it's done right and everyone gets a clear understanding of what they're voting for.
Peter, I'm just going to give you my contrary opinion, in that I don't necessarily think, my opinion is this is the right thing to do on this particular Article 3 executive branch change from 3 to 5. I think the two compelling reasons were given tonight, and that is anytime that the two of them get together, now they have quorum and they can't talk, and that's just, that is selling the town short. They ought to be able to, we ought to be able to have two members of the select board be able to communicate with one another without having an open meeting. And then, just the time portion of it, obviously, to me, that's of lesser importance. But it is important. And so the number one reason is that quorum part of it. I think the town will get a better town government by having this change. And I don't see any reason why, I guess I'm failing to see how the other, lesser important changes that have been proposed would impact that.
Yep.
To me, it's clear, especially this one. This one is clear. The town clerk one, I think the town clerk, on the town clerk change that's been proposed, I think it makes sense. I think there's so much background on that particular issue with the personnel portion of that, which shouldn't be discussed. It should be in our heads that, there's an issue with how our town clerk office is structured, but that's how the town got us. The town years ago got there somehow. And I don't know how that decision was made or how it came about. It is awkward, it is cumbersome, and it should be fixed. But it has to be fixed aside from the personnel decisions. We need to trust that when those personnel decisions come about, that they'll be made by honorable people doing the right thing, and that it is fair and just. And again, that's not what this committee's about. That's what we have, a town administrator and a select board of hopefully 5 people to oversee that.
So you got a motion on the table that's been seconded?
Any more discussion? Okay, none heard. So the motion is to vote Article 3, Executive Branch, to recommend as stated, as it's written. All those in favor, I'll go through a roll call again. Sarah?
Yay.
Ms. Reyes, sorry. Yay. Ms. Boyardi?
Yay.
Mr. Berube? Yay. Ms. McGinnis?
Yay.
Mr. Stedman?
Yay.
Mr. Borgman?
Yay.
Mr. Underhill?
Yay.
And Ms. Garzon?
Yay.
Okay. Cruising right along. Article 3, 3 powers of appointment. By amending both paragraphs, it reads as follows: the select board to have the power to appoint town administrator, the finance director, town council, town auditor, et cetera, permanent building committee. So what they're doing is they're changing so that there's an appointment. Let's see. Individuals who are serve as representatives to the town to govern advisory bodies. To appoint a 3-member board of assessors. Finance director. I'm not 100% certain of what is actually changing in this one.
It's in the town bylaws, but
Select
I
board.
understand it now it should be in the charter.
So they're
The same
consistent.
language, right?
So this was already accepted in the bylaw?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And it seems like it's pretty straightforward.
Three-member board of assessors with three terms may terminate the same with the discussion. The member of this board shall be made of the registered voters. Okay, so I'll take a motion.
I move that we accept Article 3-3, powers of appointment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve the proposed changes to Article 3-3, powers of appointment. Discussion. None heard. We'll vote. A yay vote is to accept it as written. Ms. Reyes,
Yay.
Ms. Boyardi,
Yay.
Mr. Berube, yay. Ms. McGinnis,
Yay.
Mr. Stedman,
Yay.
Mr. Underhill,
Yay.
Ms. Garzon,
Yay.
Mr. Borgman.
Yay.
Okay. Section 3-4, Town Administrator. And then this goes into subsection 1, Powers and Duties, which essentially adds all of the items. I just want us to take a couple of minutes individually to read this. I haven't had a chance to read this,
Okay.
so I'm going to take a time. Okay. If you need another minute, I'll try to go slow, but nobody reads this slower than I do, so I think everybody's
Oh, I don't know
should be
about
good.
that.
So what we're voting on, or what we're discussing, is going to be Section 3-4, Town Administrator. And that goes from approximately the middle of page 9. It includes subsection 1, Powers and Duties, all of page 10, all of page 11, including subsection 2, Acting Town Administrator. And it includes subparagraphs At the top of page 12, B and C, powers and duties and interim town administrator. It does not include, we'll discuss separately, section 4-2, other elected officers. So currently, that's a synopsis of what hopefully we just read and what we're going to discuss. As I understand this, really this is incorporating job descriptions that our current town administrator already possesses, and we're putting it into the charter, as was discussed tonight, and I'm sure discussed by the Charter Review Committee. So I'll take a motion.
Well, the one thing is, I'm sorry, do you mind?
I don't mind, go ahead.
I don't know why they're changing it to Chief Administrative Officer.
It's more modern.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, you have CEOs, CFOs, CIT, you know, it's just,
Okay.
it's the
I
term.
mean, I don't have a problem, I'm just curious
Yeah.
what the back, other than that, I'm fine with everything I've read.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if the, Mr. Chair, in discussing here the acting town administrator, does that person receive the salary of a town administrator?
Yeah, that's likely a personnel, maybe a
Right.
temporary
Just-
promotion and a.
Just to bring it up.
Yeah, I don't know what the state law, I mean, in my experience, if someone took on temporary duties, they'd have a temporary promotion commensurate with the
Right,
duties.
yeah. I'm sure that's how it is.
I suspect the state has similar policy.
Good
practice.
question.
Would anybody like to make a motion? Or we can defer. I mean,
No.
you know, we don't
No.
have to take this
Yeah,
on
I-
tonight
no,
if somebody
no.
has questions.
Perhaps we defer only because of what you just brought up, Kathy.
Oh, that's not not reason, you know, in my opinion, that's not reason to defer.
All right.
Yeah. So I move that we accept section 3-4, the town administrator, and subsections 1 and 2 as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we vote to approve the changes proposed in Article 9, Section 3-4, Town Administrator, subsection 1 and subsection 2. Discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Ms.
I
McGinnis.
just, I've never been a big supporter of setting in stone a job description in a charter. This is the exact job description that was prepared for the interview involving Mr. Kaczynski. I fear what would happen if something within this changes or is added. Does that mean the charter has to change?
Not for 10 years.
Okay.
Well, I'm giving you a tongue-in-cheek answer to what I heard tonight, and I understand your point. I think it's a good one.
Less is best, in my word, but like I said, I'm not going to go to the stake with Jody on this one.
Mine
Right.
too, but it's been through town council, so.
A lot of things have been through town council, with all due respect, that haven't been approved by the town, so,
Yeah.
Not a bad point. We're not having discussion right now, so let's have a motion, let's discuss it, and let's vote on it.
You've got a motion to accept as written.
Okay, and did I get a second?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, okay, thank you. So, my point, I agree with Kathy, and I think just by inference, why not just have a section, leave it in, change the name if you want to change the name in the charter, but then make an inference or a reference to a job description as published by the select board.
and as
Less is-
time to time amended.
Yeah, less is better, and something that takes 10 years is not something to be, a job description changes more than every 5 to 10 years.
I withdraw my motion.
Yeah, I do too.
My discussion would be that we craft language, or I think we as a committee ought to make a recommendation along those lines, that we would like to amend this portion of the article to state they can change the name, they should have a reference if they need to, you know, or we ask them a simple question is to tell them this is what we're thinking,
Right.
you know, tell us why we're wrong. Tell us why this has to be in a charter.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it does need to be in the charter. I agree with Kathy.
Yeah, so it could say just such duties and powers as defined by the select board from time to time.
Whoa, John, that was pretty good. Sorry.
But I think your point is excellent.
Sometimes just because other towns have things, and the, you know,
Yeah, you're right.
the best legal documents are the shortest ones.
You're right. Yep, you don't want to pin yourself down.
Once
Any-
again, smart thinking.
Any comments from
The peanut gallery.
those out in Zoom land?
No.
Pete, I would say on this one, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to reference something else that's modifiable
Yeah.
in the future. It seems like it's either in or it's out.
Okay.
And to me, it seems like this is the stated job description as Kathy mentioned.
Okay.
But I believe the charter committee has reviewed, and I trust the people that were on that. So I would be in favor of it.
Okay.
And I think there is still a motion on the floor to approve. Is there not?
No, it was.
No, well, I don't know the process for that. I think not sure you can withdraw it.
Oh, okay.
I think we would end up voting on it. So I'm gonna make the decision that we will, unless Jody, who has more experience at this than I do, but my intent is that we're gonna vote on the motion that was originally given. And we can vote it down, and we can go back to the select board and say, this is how the finance committee, depends on how the vote goes. So I'm not gonna color that, but if we vote it down, if we vote the motion down, I certainly would entertain alternative, either amend this language, or we could go back to the select board with a question to say, this is how we feel about it. We don't want this language in here. Here's some suggested language instead of this entire job description in a town charter. Please, amend it or don't, and then we can vote on it again.
I'd like to hear from Jody.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that, while I think we need an expanded charter, I've looked at the charter document and I think it's overly brief. It's too brief for a lot of things. I think this is too specific. I just think of the difference between the job description from our prior town administrator to our current. And if the previous town administrator's job description had been in the charter, then we wouldn't have had the flexibility to craft a different job description for our current town administrator. So I think there needs to be some specifics, but not the exact job description that we have. We need to have some flexibility, particularly because it's been, I think what I heard, literally decades since we've revised our charter. So to tie our hands for another decade seems rather foolish at this point. But I do think that having more than just we'll have a town administrator in the charter is a wise thing. So I tend to agree that this is overly specific, and I would not. I wouldn't vote to put this level of specificity in the town charter at this point. But I do think we need more specifics than what's in there right now. And that's with all due respect to the Charter Review Committee, who I know has been working on this for quite some time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jody. So we are going to vote a yay vote is to accept this language as written. A nay vote is to further consider it and possibly, whatever we come up with for a motion or a decision for the committee. So yay vote is to accept it as is.
I have one more point before we vote, if I may.
Certainly, yep.
I'd like to point out subparagraph R that says to perform any other duties as required to be performed by the town administrator by bylaws, administrative code, votes of the town meeting, or votes of the select board or otherwise. And wonder if that gives the flexibility that you're looking for, Kathy.
Just to confirm what I said, I don't think this is necessary for a charter.
Okay?
Okay, so we'll go to a vote. Ms. Reyes?
Nay?
She said nay.
Nay.
Thank you, I'm sorry, hard of hearing.
It's this.
Joyce, Ms. Boyardi?
Nay.
Mr. Berube, nay. Ms. McGinnis?
Nay.
Mr. Stedman?
Nay.
Ms. Garzon?
Nay.
Mr. Underhill?
Nay.
Mr. Borgman?
Yay.
That was a yay?
Yay.
Okay. All right, so the motion fails. My recommendation or my thought is that we would give them that feedback, and I will, do my best to give that feedback as I've heard it, or I will draft something. Really, that's all we have time for. Or we draft it right now and vote on it. So we can, and when I say draft language, it's really going to be an email to the select board that says, we discussed this, we voted on it, our recommendation is that you change this language, pare it down to what it essentially has to be there. We're concerned that you've put a job description into the town charter. We're concerned that it likely can only get changed every 5 to 10 years from what we've heard.
And it takes an act of the legislature to do so.
Correct. And the process is long, and that there be some other language in there such as duties and powers as defined by the select board, and not necessarily reference, to Jim Borgman's point, not necessarily reference a job description, but, say what the duties, the powers and duties can be as defined by the select board, or perhaps include subparagraph R.
That sounds good to me.
Can I get some discussion if everybody would agree that's the way we should go informally?
Yes.
Mr. Brewery, it's a little bit difficult to actually understand every word that's being said through this forum, from home. So it's kind of hard for me to actually follow that language. So I would rather kind of see it in writing, and my recommendation would be to put it back to the Charter Review Committee to kind of condense this into something that is more succinct, rather than trying to craft that here and now.
Right. So, Ms. Garzon, just to repeat, hopefully you can hear me better, but I don't want to craft language right now. I don't want to craft an amended language here and now, but I do want to, I personally, as the Finance Committee Chair, want to craft language that, craft our opinion back to them, our discussion that we just had, tell them our concerns, and tell them to amend it, consider amending the article as written, given our feedback. They can opt not to. If they opt not to come next week and they've chosen not to, we will vote, and we can vote it down, or we can make amended language, and we would do that at the next meeting, because we have that prerogative. We can make a recommendation which has very specific language. I'm not prepared to do that tonight, but I do want to give them the chance of some feedback.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. McGinnis?
I don't think it's our chore to recommend language. The language was given to us, we act on it, either they go up or down. I'm not here to convince the select board to do something. I'm here to, they've presented me with something, and I want to act on that rather than having to tell them
Sure.
what to do.
Okay.
But I would like to make a motion, if I might, to amend section 3.4, Town Administrator, by amending the heading to Town Administrator to Chief Administrative Officer. And that's it. I think it's important because the state we need a second before discussion. If it's appropriate, the motion, Mr. Chair.
Are you saying to just have that?
Yes.
So there's a motion on the table to amend the section 3-4 Town Administrator 1 by amending heading to Town Administrator - Chief Administrative Officer. End of clause, end of section, and thus striking the rest of the proposed language, which would go from subparagraph 2, page 9, page 10, page 11, and ending after subparagraph C at the top of page 12. The motion is to strike that language and only keep the first two lines under section 3-4 Town Administrator. And I need a second before we can proceed.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
My only concern is, does this mean that his position is now going to be called Chief Administrative Officer? Because I don't see that. I would say by amending heading to Town Administrator to be Chief Administrative Officer.
Do you want to amend the motion to put a "to be" in place of the dash?
I don't, I'm wondering if we should just look and see what the, I mean, it isn't even in the,
I would
yield to the
venture
chair.
that the current charter has section 3-4, and the heading is Town Administrator. I would guess.
And they're changing it to Chief Administrative
Right.
Officer, which is
Yes.
what the state statutes call it.
Right. But I
Okay, so my original would be by amending heading to Town Administrator to be Chief Administrative Officer,
yeah,
if that's what it is.
What I'm lacking is context of the
Right.
rest of that reference,
Right.
the heading, and is that going to be changed throughout? Because they say that below. The town, if you look at subsection powers and duties, the first sentence, the town administrator shall be the chief administrative officer of the town.
Right.
When Mike, I don't know that when this language is changing his signature block
I'm
on
going
a
to
letter.
withdraw my motion, or if you need to, we can withdraw it.
yeah, because I can't support it because I don't know
I
what
don't either,
section
I can't.
3-5 is.
Which, Kathy, in terms of we're still discussing this. Back to our original discussion, I would like to, we've already voted that we don't like this language. So
Right.
it's not going to be this, we're not going to recommend this language.
Right.
My wish is that I get some feedback that the committee would support me, and we can go to a vote, it's fine, but I don't think we need to. But I'm looking for support from this committee for me to tell the select board and the Charter Review Committee, I can put them on it too. The Finance Committee does not like this portion of Article 9.
We fear it
And-
puts them in a
and
box.
here are the reasons.
Right.
You do what you want, we're voting no on this particular portion of it. And unless you unless you change it, I'm not gonna, this is not intended to be a threat. But I need to make it obvious to them that unless it changes,
We can't support it.
we won't support it. And we will, and the only thing that's gonna happen is we will give them recommended language. It could be to strike it altogether. We could have that discussion. We could take a motion and we could vote to say, take section 3-4 out altogether. And that would be our amended language for Article 9, or we could come up with other language, which I don't care to do, because this charter committee, they've spent, as everybody knows, months, years working on this. That's fine. We're not going to do it in a night.
Yeah, we just have a fear that this locks them in for 10 years, and 10 years is a long time. Things
And
change.
jobs change.
So
Yeah,
if
so, you know,
people
that's a
can
message.
express that they support me communicating that to the select board and the charter review committee, if you feel uncomfortable, or if somebody wants a vote on that, then please make a motion. Otherwise, that's
Yeah.
what I intend to do.
I'd like you in your intent, I feel this constrains the select board, ties their hands in either adding or deleting responsibilities of the town administrator. And the leeway or the negotiations are now greatly limited with the select board.
Thank you. And I will reach out to some of you who have been vocal on this informally and separately, so that we don't have a quorum issue and a public discourse. So you can anticipate that tomorrow.
Okay?
Okay? And if anybody wants to be involved, just send me a separate email and say, hey, I have an opinion on this, give it to me, or just say you want to read what I send to the select board and charter review committee. Okay?
Okay, but there's a motion and a second on the table, so
Thank you for keeping me honest. So the second motion was to vote to approve language limited to Section 3-4, Town Administrator 1, by amending Head of Town Administrator to be Chief Administrative Officer.
correct.
and
And
we've
Peter
just-
Underhill seconded it.
Yep, it's been seconded, we've discussed it, and now we're going to vote. So, and then this motion that we're going to vote on right now would strike the rest of the language that I discussed, starting with subparagraph 2, page 9, page 10, page 11, and the top 2 paragraphs of page 12.
Which has already been deleted. Because we've
No,
voted
we
yes.
haven't already
We have not.
deleted that.
We have not. So a vote yes would be to do that. A vote no would be to allow me to convey to the select board and the charter review committee that that we don't support the language as currently written. Give them some feedback as to why.
Correct.
All those,
Yes.
all those in favor of the second motion as just described, will vote yes. Sarah?
Nay.
Well,
Joyce?
Wait a second, I think
No,
there's,
you have to,
What, Dee?
We've had a motion, we've had it seconded, we've discussed it. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, I'm not clear exactly on the motion. Can you
Okay,
state that again?
so
Sorry.
I'll state it one more time, and I apologize. The current motion that we're about to vote on, a yay vote would result in our recommending that the article be rewritten to strike the following. Starting with subparagraph 2, within section 3-4, Town Administrator, we will only leave sentence 1 by amending heading to Town Administrator to be Chief Administrative Officer. And then we would strike the next 2.5 pages, 2.5 to 3 pages. So we're voting to only allow the title, okay? That's a yay vote. A no vote would simply, we will not amend the language, but we will not support it, and we would communicate to the select board the concerns with the language as they've presented it to us. Is there any further discussion needed? Does everybody understand? Jim?
You want my vote?
No, I want to know if you have, have I?
Yes, I understand, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sarah?
Nay?
Nay. Joyce?
Nay.
Peter? Nay. Kathy?
Nay.
John?
Nay.
Jody?
Nay.
Is that a nay?
Yeah.
A nay.
Sorry. I'm so
Yay
sorry.
for nay.
Mr. Underhill
Nay.
and Mr. Borgman?
No.
No. Thank you very much for bearing with me there. Okay, so I will convey to them, and I will reach out to several of you to review what I write. Okay?
That's
All
good.
right.
Do you want to continue, or?
Yeah, we're gonna keep going.
Okay.
We're on a roll here. A clunky roll, missing a couple tires. All right. So now we're on to section 4-2, other elected officers. By amending the language as follows, there should be a moderator elected, the town clerk shall be appointed, and that's the big change that's being discussed here. Or take any other action thereto. So this is the last section of Article 9. I will take a motion.
I motion we accept Article, Section 4-2.
I second.
Second.
Okay, it's
Okay.
been moved and seconded that we vote to approve Article 9, the language within Article 9, Section 4-2, other elected officers, with the primary change there being that the town clerk shall be appointed. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Stedman.
while I haven't lived in the town long enough to know the history, let me share with this committee an experience I had in Pitt County, North Carolina, where I served as an elected commissioner of the Pitt County Soil and Water Conservation District. So we were the elected board, and we had certain powers, yet our day-to-day employee, the manager, and his staff were all county employees. So technically, we had to hire and fire, but they were county employees, so they were under county personnel rules and county score for promotion, and they kind of set their salary, and it was really an awkward situation. And I see a parallel here with the clerk being elected and part-time. So the clerk then is accountable to the voters and not to the select board and the administrator. And it just, I can relate to that, how awkward that can be if it isn't functioning well. And I think we're blessed here, from everything I hear, with an exceptional town clerk. That may not always be the case. So I think this is good forward-thinking language.
Thank you. Okay. Any?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon.
Yeah, I'd like to, I thank you for your experience in sharing that with us. That is kind of my fear here is, we have an excellent town clerk right now, who is a department head, who is an elected official, with limited hours and a very small stipend, but is in charge of the whole department where the employees work more hours. It's kind of set up for dysfunction, not that it is dysfunctional because of the hard work of our current clerk, but imagine, we want to put the
Recording in
clerk's-
progress.
we want to put the clerk's position at a full-time position, with a salary appropriate to a department head. And, we have someone who has absolutely no experience, no really qualifications for the position, but wins the election and is now a department head earning a high salary in charge of this vital department for our town. And what a mess that could really be. So I absolutely do not take anything away from the work that our current clerk is doing. I just think that the way that the position is currently arranged is not one that can work long-term for our town, and that it really should be under the purview of the select board and the town administrator's office, because it is a department head and there are union employees underneath that position. and it is just kind of ripe for a disaster in the future.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you. Any other discussion points or questions? Okay, none heard. We will vote. Ms. Reyes?
Yay.
Ms. Boyardi?
Yay.
Mr. Berube? Yay. Ms. McGinnis?
Yay.
Mr. Stedman?
Yay.
Ms. Garzon?
Yay.
Mr. Underhill?
Yay.
Mr. Borgman?
Yay.
Okay. That concludes our discussion currently for tonight on Article 9. We will, no, let's, if you don't mind, we'll come back to it. We'll come back to the other one. I've kept you 30 minutes longer than we planned for, and we will be here a long time, and I promise you, we will zip through these things next week to the best of our ability. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting this evening now.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
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 You're not upset that they didn't let us go early. I think that was,
No, God.
No.
I think that was productive
I
getting through
appreciate you
this.
guys helping me through that.
That's one less thing we have to do.